Hello, my name is Philip Priest, and this is me presenting my persuasive speech. And the topic that I want to talk about, that I want to persuade you on, is public transportation and the need for public transportation and the reason why in the United States we can have it and the reason why we don't have it. So there's two sides of this argument. I think the main side, the reason why we don't have it, is you have to look at the car industry. And at first you have to look at the history of the car industry, and then you have to look at where the car industry is currently. So the history of the car industry, how it grew into power, really has to do with lobbying the government. The tire industries wanted to make money as well as the car industries, and so public transportation started getting less money, so more people would buy cars and invest in cars. And then when the highway system was created, it made it where the best way to travel was through private transportation, which is owning your own car and having that freedom. And then the reason why, one of the big reasons against public transportation now is that people love their cars and love their vehicles, and that's very true. But in the world that we live in today, cars have become a sense of idealism. You have to have a nice car, the car needs maintenance a lot, and the car is an extra expense that most people can't afford to keep up with it. And it's a class dividing, you know. There's nothing wrong with having a nice car, but it's also not everyone can have that, and not everyone can benefit from safe public transportation is one. The cars break down, cars have problems, and the next big one is not everyone can afford to do the maintenance that the car needs, and so a lot of people get stranded, and when they get stranded, then they have a hard time from getting place to place. And then they have to rely on public transportation that is vastly underfunded and weak in getting people from place to place. I don't know if you've ever been on the Lex train in Lexington, but it is very poor compared to major cities. New York City has a great public transportation, and the reason for that is that they've invested in it, and that not everyone, you don't need a car to go everywhere, because everything's so small and dense that you can take the train, but it's also that it's been publicly funded. And it's the main way that people get around in New York City, where in big car cities, it's cars. But I think as a society, you always have to focus, what about the people that don't have a car? How are they getting from place to place? And in the past, people could use public transportation to get around Lexington even. There's pictures of the trolley system in downtown Lexington, and there were trains that could take you, there were train stops that could take you to Florida, they could take you to DC, that anyone could get to. And so when you go, one of the only way truly to travel fast and efficient to somewhere far, let's say I wanted to go to DC, or I needed to go to DC for work, and I don't have a car, well, the only thing I can do is really buy a plane ticket and get there efficiently. And the reason for that, and plane tickets are sometimes very cheap sometimes, but sometimes they're also really, really expensive. And so you really do need to think about how expensive buying a plane ticket can be on just the average person. And so if you had a train, it'd be cheaper. It'd also be better for the environment. And that's my next case, is that the more and more the government's going to shift towards electric cars, the more and more people are not going to be able to make that jump. And so it will leave a vastly large portion of people who don't have a safe public transportation to go from place to place. And it's going to cause a huge divide in wealth, education, and just about anything. One of the things that I really discovered living at Transy was how much of it is a food desert in that area, that you cannot walk to a grocery store where Transy is. In the dorms, you cannot walk down the street and go to a grocery store and get fresh produce. Are there grocery stores about 2 or 3, 4 miles away? Yeah, and you have to have a car to get there. It's very unlikely that you can take the bus to get to a place in Lexington. It takes a long time, it's not efficient, and it's just poorly ran. And they're doing the best they can do, they're not funded a ton, they need to be funded more to make it possible. And in my opinion, if I was in charge of Lexington infrastructure, I would make it where you could take a train downtown, you could take a train to the main hubs of Lexington, of like a rail line. And I think this would make Lexington more walkable. I think it would make it more of a city feel. I think one of the unique things about Transy is that you are in the city of Lexington. You're not in the burbs. Growing up in the burbs of Lexington, you barely went downtown because, like, well, why would you? You know, you're either going to go down there to eat or to go to a concert. But downtown should be hubs for just entertainment, for congregating, for meeting people. And I think that's what makes a downtown really thrive, is that people can get there without driving. And I think Lexington in particularly, and there's many cities that rely too heavily on driving. And one of the things that I discovered earlier, remembered, is that when downtown Lexington raised their parking, it hurt businesses because parking was more expensive. And so I think with that case, you know, it makes it where people are gonna have to spend more money to even drive their car. And that also leads to gas. As gas gets more and more expensive, more and more people can't afford to fill up their tank and go from place to place. And it really makes it a city isolated when you have this situation. And this also happens to kids who grow up in suburbs. They feel isolated because they're so far from everything. And really, until you're able to drive, and if you're fortunate to have a car at 16, that's the first time you really get to taste freedom and movement. Where if you look at bigger cities, kids are able to ride the sub and go place to place. And I think that is good. That helps you adventure, that helps you explore. And so I think cities need to invest in public transportation. And I think if they don't, then we're going to continue to see this decline, that one class is able to travel and then one class is not. And one class is able to go to the grocery more often than the other. And I think as much as people love their cars, I don't think they're looking into the bigger picture. And I think they have fallen debate and falling in this idea that private and space and your own space, I would say, is better for you than public transportation. And as climate change continues to go on, we need to start focusing more on public transportation and how to be more efficient. And I think everyone driving their private cars is a very inefficient way to get there. And so I hope you enjoyed my speech on public transportation and the need for it, and how we need to get away from our private vehicles and how we can do that.